I think we've not covered this part, right? Components of working memory. So yeah, we'll be going over this. So we have the central executive, which is basically the main center which controls and coordinates the information. And then we have the phonological loop, which is basically useful for holding auditory information. Then we have the episodic buffer, which integrates information from different systems into a coherent experience. And then we have the visuospatial sketchpad, which handles the visual and the spatial location information. And we have language, short-term memory, and visual semantics. So the black ones, which are these four, are fluid, and the blue ones are crystallized. So I'll be going over what this means later, but for now we'll just go over each component's role and their significance as well. So the central executive. So the role of the central executive is the most, basically it is the most important component of the working memory system. It functions like the control center or the manager that directs attention, coordinates cognitive processes, and decides what information should be stored, manipulated, or discarded. Right. Now, fluid intelligence. The central executive is associated with fluid intelligence, which involves problem solving, reasoning, adaptability, and it allows individuals to adapt to new situations and challenges, use working memory resources effectively, and make decisions. And crystallized intelligence is also linked to crystallized intelligence, which refers to, I think it's repeated twice. So it is also linked to crystallized intelligence, which refers to accumulated knowledge and experience, such as language skills and factual knowledge. The central executive uses these stored resources to guide actions and decisions. For example, when trying to solve a complex math problem, the central executive manages the task by directing attention to relevant information, numbers and symbols, coordinating between different memory systems, phonological loop, visuospatial, sketchpad, and episodic buffer, and making decisions based on your prior knowledge, crystallized intelligence. Now we move on to the phonological loop. So the role of the phonological loop is to process and store auditory verbal information. So it plays a key role in language processing, verbal working memory, and learning new words. So the phonological loop consists of phonological store. The part holds spoken. This part holds spoken words and sounds temporarily, like in a year, and articulatory rehearsal process. This part allows verbal information to be rehearsed or repeated to keep it in the working memory, like when you repeat a phone number multiple times to remember it, right? Now, characteristics: limited capacity. The phonological loop can hold information for only a brief time period, about 2 seconds, but it's highly flexible when it comes to processing verbal information. And the phonological similarity effect: it is more difficult to recall words that sound similar, for example, cat and bat, than words that sound dissimilar. To recall words that sound similar, because similar sounding words usually create a confusion whether it was that cat or bat, right? So it is easier to remember words that are dissimilar in sound in the auditory sense. Now, when trying to remember a short string of numbers or a word list, you may silently rehearse the information like repeating the number over and over to keep it active in your mind for longer. Finally, we have the visuospatial sketchpad, which is basically useful for handling visual and spatial information. It's responsible for tasks like mental rotation, navigation, and visual memory, such as remembering the layout of a room, the architecture, or imagining a visual scene. So, visual and spatial info. Right. Key functions are basically visual processing. The sketchpad processes information related to visual features such as colors, shapes, and size. And spatial processing deals with the location and movement of objects in space. Characteristics useful for spatial awareness and visual problem solving, like reading maps or visualizing a geometric problem. Now, when navigating through an unfamiliar city, you rely on the visuospatial sketchpad to maintain a mental map of the streets and the locations of key landmarks. And finally, we have the episodic buffer. So this is basically the most recently added component of working memory, introduced by Badley in 2000. It integrates information from various sources, example, phonological loop, visuospatial sketchpad, and long-term memory into coherent episodes or chunks of information. So this is the main idea here of the episodic buffer. I'll highlight that. So the key function is that the episodic buffer links short-term memory and long-term memory. It helps combine visual, auditory, and semantic information into meaningful experiences or chunks, making it easier to retrieve information when needed. So the characteristics: the episodic buffer acts as a temporary storage system that holds and integrates diverse information for further processing by the central executive. So real-world example would be when recalling a memory, the episodic buffer helps to combine different sensory elements like sight, sound, and motion of the event into a coherent memory representation. Yeah.